All right, welcome back to the channel. So, what a great interview on Trill Boxing Talk with Errol Spence Jr.'s trainer, Derek James. And in that interview, he said some things that were very eye-opening about Shawn Porter. And also last night with the introduction of Jaron Ennis as a legitimate top 147 pounder, we have to enter him into the conversation along with Terence Crawford. Let's do that or talk about those things in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. So, Derek James is the trainer of Errol Spence Jr. He is also the trainer of the WBC 154-pound champion, Jermell Charlo. And he was on Trill Boxing Talk this Saturday with Black Fight Fan TV and 78 Sports TV and gave an absolutely great interview with some very interesting things coming out of it about Errol Spence Jr. Now, the few things that we're going to talk about in this video that were discussed was one, Derek James discussed candidly what the conditioning of Errol Spence Jr. is coming back off that car accident. He also talked about Shawn Porter and the Errol Spence and Shawn Porter in the next several fights that he's going to make, and then also with Terence Crawford fight looking a little bit more questionable, there is a new a new guy in the 147-pound division, man, that is fighting close to the over on the PBC side that might again hold up Terence Crawford and what he's doing. So, man, please make the Shawn Porter fight. So let's get into this. It might seem like a lot, but I promise you I will connect the dots for you. So, Derek James was asked about Errol Spence Jr. and what he's looking like coming in to the fight with Danny Garcia, and he said something that I thought was obviously correct. Excuse me, didn't realize that my lights messed up. Which I thought was obviously correct, and he was just very insistent that they would not bring Errol Spence Jr. back if they did not believe that Errol Spence Jr. was all the way there, because obviously this is a very, very dangerous sport. He's fighting guys at the very, very top level, and so they're saying, look, man, he's not going to be playing around with this. We're not playing around with this. He's all the way back. He's exactly where he should be. And then actually he talks about the camp for Errol Spence Jr. and how it's going with Danny Garcia, and he says that Errol Spence Jr. came into camp all the way, all the way in shape. And we know from not just out of the words, the mouth of Errol Spence Jr., but also the rumors and things that were going around for his last two camps, which were pretty much that the camps for Errol Spence camps for Mikey Garcia, for the Mikey Garcia fight in Dallas, and the fight with Shawn Porter, his last fight with Shawn Porter, that both of those camps were essentially fat camps where Errol Spence Jr. had to lose a bunch of weight that he was putting on in between fights. With the accident and the coronavirus, the two things combined to get Errol Spence Jr. much more focused and on his job for this fight. So you can see in the workout videos and the things that he puts up on YouTube that he looks like he's ready to go into training camp. Now, obviously, the training camp itself is going to be different than, the workouts and things that he was doing to keep himself in shape. And when Derek James was asked whether or not Errol Spence was sparring yet, he said, no, he's not sparring yet. That's going to take place when they get back. And I suspect when they get back means when the training camp for Jermell Charlo ends, even though they did mention in here that Jermell and Errol were both in training camp with each other, both working with the same sparring partners, and that the camp was switching between, Houston and Dallas. So, these guys were in camp together. So it's just going to be really interesting. It's nice to see, it's nice to hear again from Derek James that Errol Spence Jr. is all the way there. I'm looking forward to him being 100% in this fight. I don't see why why he wouldn't. And if there's anything funny that comes when he starts sparring, then, we'll see if something happens there. But also, the working out and all that stuff really does test your body too. So, with the road work, the recovery off the road work, hitting the bags, all those type of things, not taking shots to the head, obviously. However, a lot of that wear and tear and working out over a series of months will tell you, whether or not you're in shape or not, or whether there's some, major issue that the doctors didn't see. So, that's good news out of Derrick James. Now, the interesting thing that he said about Terence Crawford was, though, when asked by the chat whether or not he thought that, the Terence Crawford fight was going to happen next, and he, basically said what I thought was the case, was that, that there's a series of fights lined up for Errol, man, where, you're going to wind up having Errol Spence Jr. versus Danny Garcia this one. If Errol Spence Jr. gets past Danny Garcia, which I think that he will, then it'll be Shawn Porter. It'll be Shawn Porter after that. And then after Shawn Porter, more than likely, it's going to be time for an IBF mandatory, which is going to either be Abu Karev or Sergey Lipinets. So, there's a lot of fights lined up. And he talked about the Shawn Porter fight, and he was like, look, as much as Errol wants to fight Terence Crawford, there is the problem with the money and the fact that, Terence Crawford really doesn't do the numbers, or hasn't done the numbers that Shawn Porter has done. So he's like, he didn't completely pour water on the Terence Crawford fight, but, without Terence Crawford really getting out there and fighting top-notch competition, I don't see how he's going to be able to turn that around and get to the point where, people over there on the PBC are jumping up and down for it, over the money. And, just kind of with a more educated, now that I have a little bit more educated eye about how the PBC is working, yeah, man, I think that would be I think that's a hard fight to make, even though Errol Spence Jr. himself wants it. So, last night, though, I'm telling you, last night with Jaron Ennis beating Abreu, man, that dude has arrived, man. So, an additional issue, an additional issue with the Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr. fight is that this kid, Jaron Ennis, is about to be running through the 147-pound division, man. And, from the looks of him last night, I'm telling you, man, I think this dude might already be a top 3. He might already be a top 3 welterweight, man. This guy is absolutely, positively a dynamic fighter. So, and I do believe that he's also fighting on the PBC side, or at least right now he's fighting on Showtime. I know that his promoter is Cameron Duncan, the same Cameron Duncan who I believe signed Terence Crawford and was working with Terence Crawford and Mikey Garcia over there at when they were at Top Rank. I do believe that Cameron Duncan is the same guy that is over Jaron Ennis, but man, Jaron Ennis can really throw a big wrench in all of this welterweight stuff, man, and just gives one more really high-level fighter over on the PBC side that, makes it that much less likely that they're going to need to go get Terence Crawford over from the 140 from Top Rank. So, this is just, it's just one of these things in boxing, man, where I think I really wish that we had enough voice with these promotional companies, or the fans had enough voice with these promotional companies, where we could really put the pressure on these guys to make the type of fights like Errol Spence, Terence Crawford now. Because, man, every time you tear a month off your calendar, you have those calendars you flip up. Every time you flip a page on that calendar, man, this fight is getting older and older. Younger fighters that are behind, or that are behind them, are looking better and better. You've got the Virgil, and on top of that, not just Jaron Ennis, you also got Virgil Ortiz coming into the 147-pound division. So, man, it's really not looking good for Terence Crawford, unless Terence Crawford wants to get out there and Bob Arum wants to let Terence Crawford get out there to come get some of these PBC guys, man, because, even like with the style of Terence Crawford, man, Terence Crawford and Jaron Ennis, man, dude, Jaron Ennis looks like Terence Crawford 2.0 to me. Like I think he might have everything and then a little bit that Terence Crawford has, man. So I don't know if they might mess around and have Terence Crawford be like, hey, man, let's get the first Terence Crawford PBC fight which is actually not true because I think he did fight Felix Diaz, who was a PBC fighter. But hey man, let's get him in there with Jaron Ennis. Man, the 147 pounds is just so crazy deep, man. What an incredible weight class, man. And I think we are, or could be, really be in a golden era, that 147 pound between Errol Spence, Danny Garcia, Shawn Porter, Manny Pacquiao, Keith Thurman, Terence Crawford, Jaron Ennis, Virgil Ortiz, Jamal James, Thomas Delorme, or Yordanis Ugas. It is just an absolutely, positively, insanely stacked division. So many great fights that can be made between guys that it's like, man, I just really hope these guys all mix it up. And it seems like it's happening. Maybe a little bit too much, because now that we're starting to dig in and look in the ranking systems and how these fighters are getting moved around the rankings, it's starting to look like the PBC is doing a bit of an top rank type of thing, where they're starting to have the same guys fighting for the same titles over and over again. We'll talk about that in a later video today, but that's my take on what came out of the interview with Derrick James. Again, go check it out on Trill Boxing Talk, the channel Trill Boxing Talk with Black Fight Fan TV and 78 Sports TV. Excellent interview. You let me know what you think in the comments section. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Shout out to all the Patreons and the channel members. And with that, I'm out. Peace.